What happens when faith and violence meet at the same altar? Not after a discussion, not in theory, but right there, in front of ordinary people, in a mass that was supposed to end like all the others. It was an ordinary morning in Chicago. Nothing indicated that this day would be remembered by those present. The church was full, but not overcrowded. Families, elderly people, workers who had stopped there before continuing with the rest of their day. The smell of incense still lingered in the air when the clock struck 9 in the morning. At the altar, Father John Williams conducted the service with the serenity of someone who has served for decades. 61 years, calm posture, firm voice. To those observing from the outside, it was just another Mass. But there was something different in the atmosphere, a tense silence almost imperceptible, as if the air were too heavy. Then a man entered, Pastor Peter Simons, 47 years old. At that moment, no one knew his name. They only noticed his gaze. It was not the gaze of someone who came to pray. It was fixed, heavy, determined. He sat in the back pews, not participating in the prayers, not responding to the words of the rite. Inside the pocket of his coat, something heavy pressed against the fabric. Later, this would become clear. What was known afterward is that he carried an old guilt, an unresolved mourning, an anger that found a target in faith. For him, that altar symbolized everything he had lost. As the celebration progressed, the tension increased. When the moment of consecration approached, the pastor stood up. He did not shout. He did not run. He walked. Each step seemed calculated. Some people noticed, others did not. The silence of the church began to be broken by a discomfort that was difficult to explain. When the Father lifted the host, Pastor Peter was already a few meters from the altar. He was about to act, putting his hand inside his coat pocket, as if preparing for an attack, his eyes wide, and at the moment he took another step toward the altar. The lights in the church flickered slightly. They did not go out. They simply changed in intensity. Some people reported that, at that moment, they had difficulty breathing. Others said they felt a strange fragrance that did not come from any flower present in the place. The fact is that something strange had happened in that church that day. When everyone realized it, Pastor Peter, for no apparent reason, was on the ground kneeling and crying. It was something very abrupt. One moment he was standing about to attack the priest, and the next he was already on the floor. There was no explanation for that. Later that day, while everyone was trying to understand what had happened at that exact moment, a Eucharistic minister suggested looking at the church's camera system to analyze what had really happened with the pastor. The church's security cameras were functioning normally that day. The system was active, recording continuously, with the date and time visible in the corner of the image. The recording clock marked 9 hours and 17 minutes in the morning. The images remained clear up to this point. Then something inexplicable happened. The file skipped. An empty interval appeared in the timeline of the recordings, as if an entire fragment of that moment had been ripped away. There is no image of what happened next. There is no sound. There is no record. Just emptiness between 2 seconds. Before I continue, I want to ask you something very quickly. If you are not yet part of this family, subscribe now here to the channel and leave your like. Every day, we witness facts that do not ask for explanation, just attention and devotion. Go ahead and write in the comments the city where you are listening to this testimony. I want to know how far our testimonies are reaching. Now let me continue from where I left off. When the images returned, the church was no longer the same. People were standing, some kneeling, others paralyzed. The man who had advanced toward the altar was now on the ground, crying. The object he carried in his pocket lay just a few centimeters from his hand. It was a short, common blade, but enough to turn that morning into a tragedy. What occurred during the absent interval was never captured by any camera. No cell phone recorded it. No microphone picked it up. Still, everyone knew that something had interrupted the natural course of events. Something prevented that tragedy from happening. It was not a shout. It was not human strength. It was silence. Father John remained still for a few seconds. He did not raise his voice. He did not step back. He simply observed the man kneeling before the altar, his body shaking with sobs like someone who had been disarmed from within. Worshippers reported that, for a moment, even the children ceased their crying. The pastor was not speaking, he was crying. He repeated disconnected words, asking for something to stop, for it to cease. He mentioned no names. He made no accusations. He simply fell apart in remorse. People nearby heard him say, almost in a whisper, that he no longer remembered the hatred, only the loss. Minutes later, security agents arrived. They were called without fuss to contain the pastor, who in turn did not resist. He remained kneeling until he was led outside. There was no confrontation, no aggression, just the weight of something that had ended before it even began. Outside, the city's routine continued. Buses passed by, vendors shouted offers, traffic remained impatient. Inside the church, however, no one was able to resume the celebration. The father ended the Mass without lengthy explanations. He simply asked for silence and prayer. Shortly afterward, Father John hired IT technicians to check and access the church's recording system. The file showed a flaw that was impossible to ignore. Between 9 hours and 17 minutes and 9 hours and 19 minutes, there was a void. No corrupted data, no distorted images, just total absence, as if the system had recorded nothing. It was confirmed that there was no shutdown of the camera equipment, no power outage or external interference. The internal clock of the system was still correct. Only that segment of the recording had disappeared. Outside the church, people began to comment on something stranger. Some said that at the moment when the lights flickered, they felt a soft fragrance, different from the incense. Others claimed that the candles had leaned slightly, even though there was no wind. No one spoke loudly. It was as if everyone feared breaking something too fragile. The news quickly spread, not as a scandal, but as a question. What made a man drop a blade and cry before an altar? What happened in that interval that no camera could capture? In the hours that followed, the church remained closed, not by police order, but by internal decision. There was a silent consensus that that space needed to breathe. Even so, later that afternoon, the first authorities arrived, not to investigate a completed crime, but to understand why it had not happened. Among them was the doctor, 54 years old, a physicist known for serving as a consultant in cases classified as religious phenomena. Her job was simple: to separate emotion from evidence, to dismantle illusions before they turned into blind devotion. She started with the obvious. She analyzed the electrical system. No failures, no overloads. The entire neighborhood had functioned normally throughout the morning. Then she examined the cameras, scene after scene. The jump in the file showed no faulty compression or data corruption. The system simply did not record that interval. The time jumped from 9:17 to 9:19 without any trace. 2 whole minutes missing, not erased, not overwritten. Missing. The doctor requested access to the audio equipment. No record of sound peaks, bright flashes, or external interference. The silence that the worshippers reported was not recorded. It existed only there, in that space, at that moment. Meanwhile, the testimonies piled up. They were not identical accounts. On the contrary, each person described something different. Some spoke of an intense light. Others said they saw nothing, only felt. There were those who swore they noticed a floral scent, soft, impossible to identify. Jasmine, some said. Others could not name it. Science does not deal with sensations. It deals with repetition. And there was not enough repetition to formulate any solid hypothesis. Still, something bothered the doctor. The reports did not contradict each other. They complemented each other, as if each person had captured only a part of something larger. She returned to the church at dusk, without a team, without equipment. She just observed. The altar was intact, no signs of impact, no visible changes. But as she approached the exact spot where the man had knelt, she noticed something strange. The marble seemed slightly opaque, as if it had been heated and cooled quickly. Subsequent tests found no chemical, mineral, or synthetic residues. Nothing that explained the microscopic alteration detected. The preliminary report noted only one phrase: indeterminate origin. Meanwhile, Pastor Peter remained silent. He did not request a lawyer. He made no statements. When asked what had happened, he limited himself to saying that something had stopped him. Not by force, but by memory. He said that at that moment, hatred simply no longer fit inside him. The news gained attention, but it did not become a spectacle. There were no images of the central moment. There was no definitive proof. There were only questions. If this were just collective hysteria, why did the technical records fail exactly in the same interval? And if it wasn't, what had occupied that silence? Those who were there knew it was not yet time for answers, only for attention. In the following days, the silence began to weigh more than the questions. The church reopened discreetly. There was no official announcement nor special celebration. Still, people began to arrive, not out of curiosity, but out of unease. Something had been broken inside, and no one knew exactly what. Father John Williams avoided interviews. When questioned, he limited himself to saying that he witnessed something that could not be put into words. He did not speak of miracles. He did not claim to have seen any light. He only confirmed that he announced violence had been interrupted by something that did not come from human hands. Pastor Peter remained detained for a few days. The process followed its natural course. Dr. Paul Menendez presided over the initial hearings. The images, the testimonies, and the absence of the central record were presented. The trial did not revolve around what had happened, but around what had not happened. No victims, no injuries, no completed aggression. When he had the opportunity to speak, the pastor did not try to justify himself. He did not blame anyone. He simply said that he had entered that place determined to confront something he deemed responsible for his pain. But that, the moment he approached the altar, he could not proceed. He said he remembered what he had lost, but also what he had forgotten: his own humanity. Dr. Helena followed everything with clinical attention. Her reports remained inconclusive. There was not enough evidence to assert any extraordinary physical phenomenon. Still, something bothered her. No simulation could reproduce the simultaneous failure in the systems. No hypothesis explained why different people reported distinct yet compatible sensations. She returned once more to the church, this time during a common celebration. She sat in the last pews, observing faces. She was not looking for signs. She was looking for reactions. At the moment of consecration, nothing happened. No oscillation, no perfume, no interruption. Still, something changed in her, not in the environment, but in her gaze. After the Mass, she remained silent. She made no notes. She simply observed the altar for a few more minutes. Upon leaving, she passed by the spot where the pastor had knelt. She lightly touched the marble. It was cold, normal. Even so, she quickly withdrew her hand, as if she had touched something alive. Meanwhile, the pastor awaited a judicial decision. During this period, he refused visits. He did not speak about the occurrence. He only repeated that he had not been stopped, but reached. He said that something had made him stop before it became irreversible. The city continued its rhythm, the traffic, the work, the constant noise. But among those who had been present that day, something remained suspended, not as fear, but as responsibility. As if everyone knew they had witnessed something that required care. Not everything needs to be explained to be respected. Some experiences ask only for silence and change. If you feel that something in your life also needs to stop before it goes too far, stay until the end. What comes next does not speak of light, but of choice. Weeks passed, and the city resumed its rhythm. The judicial process continued. Pastor Peter received psychological support and alternative measures. There was no public celebration, nor grand statements. When asked by journalists, he limited himself to saying that he was not saved from something external, but from himself. He did not mention visions. He spoke of interruption, of a limit he could not cross. Father John continued celebrating Masses as usual. He did not alter the rite. He did not seek notoriety. In his homily, he spoke only once about that day. He said that faith is not proven with lights, but with choices. that the true sign was not what no one could record, but what everyone could see afterward. Dr. Helena finalized her report with technical and precise language. She found no physical explanation for the simultaneous failure in the records. She did not assert a supernatural phenomenon. She concluded with an unusual observation for someone in her field. Rare events may not leave measurable traces, but produce lasting effects on human behavior. She did not comment on the case publicly again. Some people began to attend the church with more silence, others with more care. There were those who left a candle without asking for anything. There were those who simply sat for a few minutes and left. Small changes, too discreet to make headlines. One day, after a common celebration, someone left a white rose at the foot of the altar image. There was no card. There was no name. Just the flower. No one knew who brought it. The next day it was no longer there. Nothing extraordinary happened again. No new interruption, no new technical failure. Still, for those who were present that morning, something had been displaced definitively. The certainty that not all violence needs to reach an end to be interrupted. Sometimes it is enough for someone to stop. What happened in that interval without a record no longer belongs to the debate. It belongs to the choices that came afterward, to the hands that did not rise, to the words that did not hurt, to the blade that fell before touching someone. And this testimony comes to an end. I hope something in it has touched your heart. And before you leave, don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and share this beautiful story with your friends and family. Help us grow more each day. May God and the Virgin Mary always be by your side. Amen.